Welcome to Sports Spectrum, where we bring Jesus back into the conversation. Here's your host, former ESPN producer, Jason Romano.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Sports Spectrum. I am Jason Romano. So glad you're tuning into the show today. We got a great conversation with Marty Lamb, who is in a very unique space with his job as an amateur scout and area scout with the Los Angeles Dodgers, the 2020 World Series champions. And Marty Lamb had a lot to do with that World Series championship team in a unique way that you would not have seen unless you heard it here on Sports Spectrum. So I'm excited for you to hear Marty's story. First, a couple ways to get in touch with us. You can check out our website, sportspectrum.com. That is the place for all of our content here at the Ministry of Sports Spectrum. We have daily devotionals that are on the website Monday through Friday. And that, by the way, is a great way to go through a devotional with a team or a core of people. You can just share it, sportspectrum.com. There's your devotional. There's your scripture, a little bit of a write-up and some encouragement. And you can go through that with your small group or your team or just a couple friends. So go to sportspectrum.com for our daily devotionals. You also get our podcast there. You can listen to almost every podcast that we've had right there on the website at sportspectrum.com. And then different stories and articles that are updated each and every day. Stories on the intersection of sports and faith from the world of football, basketball, baseball, hockey, you name it. It's there at sportspectrum.com. And right at the top of the website, there's a little icon that says magazine. And if you know about Sports Spectrum, you know that the magazine is the very first thing that was ever created in regards to this ministry with Sports Spectrum some 36 years ago, back in 1985. So here we are in 2021, and we still have the magazine going strong. In fact, it's really an amazing piece of content, a unique resource that we offer and is available to you right now to purchase. Now, it's the only thing that we charge, but we keep the cost really low, $18 for an entire year subscription, $18, that's it. For the Sports Spectrum magazine, you can subscribe right now. You can get it for yourself, get it for your kids, for your grandkids, for a small group, for a youth group, however you want. There's devotionals in there too, in the magazine that you can go through each day, each week with your group or by yourself. But it's a great, great magazine, I'm telling you, and you got to go get it because right now on the cover is James McCann from the New York Mets, who was a guest on our podcast about a month ago, and his story is an incredible one. And there's nothing like holding a magazine in your hand, opening it up, and reading it. I know people want to move into the digital age, and I'm as guilty of that as everybody. I love my iPad and I love my phone and reading and getting things quick. But when you hand me a book or you hand me a magazine, man, there's something different there. And I love holding the Sports Spectrum magazine in my hand to share with others or to read myself. So go get a copy if you can. It's available right there at the website, sportspectrum.com. Again, $18, super cheap and a great way to sow into the ministry of Sports Spectrum right there at sportspectrum.com. We want to give thanks to our partners today, our sponsors, Water Mission, fighting the global water crisis, working to stop the global spread of COVID-19. They provide urgently needed safe water, sanitation, and hygiene solutions to refugee settlements and other vulnerable communities. There is a big-time water issue across our globe. 4.4 billion people lacking access to adequate sanitation, 2.1 billion people lacking access to safe water. You can make a difference by going to watermission.org, fighting the global water crisis. You can sow into that ministry. You can donate. You can even just pray for the people that are behind Water Mission and fighting the global water crisis at watermission.org. You can also check out fillthestadium.com. That's the website for our partnership with Compassion International and the Fill the Stadium Initiative. We talked about the Fill the Stadium Initiative now for almost a year. And because of COVID-19, nearly 70,000 kids and their families were potentially going to be left without a sponsorship, a child sponsorship. That's food, education, medical care, vocational training. Listen to this, though. Got some really great news here. Because of the Fill the Stadium Initiative, people like you, people like our pro athlete friends, we've been able to fill 46,000 seats of the 70,000 seats that remain empty. That's more than half. That's almost 3/4 of the seats that we're trying to fill with compassion have been filled. $22 million plus raised. And that is an incredible number. It's almost an overwhelming number when I say it out loud, but we're not done. There's still close to 30,000 kids that are waiting right now in desperate need of help for a sponsorship. So here's what I'd like you to do. Go to fillthestadium.com. You can learn more right there. If you feel led, pray about it and see if God tugs your heart to donate, to not just sponsor a child, but to really sponsor a family for an entire year through the Fill the Stadium initiative at Compassion. These kids are discipled in the Word of God, and really the incredible work that's being done releasing kids from poverty is so important with Compassion. I know we've got it hard here in the U.S. with COVID, but this is unlike anything that you can imagine. I've watched some videos. I've talked to some people who are part of Compassion. It's dire right now. So check out fillthestadium.com to learn more and give today. This is a stadium that cannot remain empty. Fillthestadium.com. All right, we're going to get to our conversation with Marty Lamb. He is a Los Angeles Dodgers amateur scout. He's been covering the, scouting world for the Dodgers since 1999, covering 4 major states. So he's an area scout in Kentucky, Indiana, Ohio, and Tennessee. Listen to this. Of the Dodgers' 10 first-round picks since 2015, Marty Lamb was the area scout for 6 of them. That's a pretty good track record. Now, not only is Marty a Dodgers scout, and he's helped scout and sign players like Walker Buehler and Will Smith, Chad Billingsley, A.J. Ellis, and others, he also serves on the board of directors for an amazing nonprofit, faith-based organization called Refuge for Women. And that's where our conversation is going to take us on the back end of this podcast. And it's an incredible ministry, this Refuge for Women ministry. Marty's going to go into detail about the kind of work that's being done with the Refuge for Women. So let's take a listen to Marty Lamb joining us here today on Sports Spectrum. Marty, welcome to Sports Spectrum. How are you?
Thanks, Jason. I'm doing good. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, this will be great. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for being on the show, and really fascinated by your role. So you're an amateur scout. I think the general sports fan can kind of assume or interpret that you scout amateur players. So it might be high school, it might be college, but take us into kind of exactly what your role entails with the Dodgers.
Okay. So I've worked for the Dodgers. This is 23 drafts. I tell people I've been tricking them for 23 years and they hadn't fired me yet. So, but you've got an amateur scouting staff that basically you've got different layers. So I am an area scout, and so I cover Ohio, Kentucky, Tennessee, and then part of West Virginia. And we see high school, college players. And then basically we're sort of like the first line of defense, I guess. So we're going to go and identify these players. And then if we identify them high enough, then we'll have like a cross-checker. My cross-checker has 4 or 5 guys underneath him. So he'll come see my better guys. Then also the higher type round guys, you'll have a national cross-checker, and we've got 3 of those that they go all across the country. Then you've also got our scouting director, our assistant scouting director, that will see players along with some different people in the office. So we're sort of there to identify them early, do a lot of the background type information, and hopefully, ring the bell of, hey, we need to get more guys in to see this player. So
that's fascinating. I know some of the players that you've signed, Walker Buehler, Will Smith, are a couple, just to name a few, Chad Billingsley, A.J. Ellis. So there's some names there, and it's I would say, a unique role that you're in almost serving a team that would go on to win a World Series. So I guess the first question I have off of that is, take me to the couple days before and then at the MLB amateur draft. And obviously last year was a completely different year with a shortened draft. And we'll talk about 2020 in a second, but in a normal year, where are you around draft time? Are you involved with whoever it is, the general manager, the scouting director, are you involved with them in making these picks, or has your work kind of already been done before the draft approaches?
Right. So you've got a couple scenarios. Most of the time, area scouts will, before the draft, let's say, I don't know, a couple weeks before the draft, they'll come in and present their players. And then, the talk, they'll ask you questions, you'll present the player, they'll ask you questions, about the skills, the makeup, the character, where you might have to draft him to take him, who else might be on him. I mean, there's sort of this big poker game, involved with this whole thing.
Yeah.
Now, I've been in the draft room a couple times. 2003, when we did take Chad Billingsley and A.J. Ellis. And then I was a cross-checker for 1 year, so I was in the draft room at that point. And then last year I was in the draft room per se. It was all virtual, but I was in there. So they bring area guys in there, for different times. It was good for me because I was under Logan White and Ed Creech and all, but I'd never been in the draft room with Billy Gasparino and his crew. So it was good for me to sort of see how they put everything together this past year. But on a typical year, we're at our house or still seeing games. And then as it gets closer to the draft, after you've already presented your players, they might go call you, hey, what about this? Remind us about this. Can you check on this or whatever? So you're still sort of doing work as you get closer to it. Because, the way the baseball draft had been, it's going to change this year a little bit. You still had teams that were playing in regionals, super regionals, all the way up to the draft. And so you might go and watch a super regional when we report back, hey, look, the biggest thing at that point is probably nothing's changed. Agent's still the same. Signability still the same. He's healthy, those kind of things, because pretty much at that point, the majority of the hay's in the barn at that point.
Yeah.
So.
What about how you find the players to scout? Obviously, you're in an area, so you're in a region. You mentioned, I think you said Kentucky, Indiana, Ohio, Tennessee, those kind of areas. But also with the advent of technology and social media, I have to imagine if somebody finds out about Marty Lamb, they're inundating your email box, your Twitter, whatever it is, with videos for you to watch. So you probably have more of a wider range of people to look at before you can suggest to your superiors whether to think about these players than you did maybe 23 drafts ago when you first started. But then even through that, how do you decipher which guys to kind of really go after and scout? And obviously there's some big names on some big schools, and those kind of just are the ones everybody's scouting. But how do you kind of find out who you're going after?
Well, like you said, the social media aspect of it has been, just in the last few years, it's really exploded, obviously. And so you use some of that. But for example, I'll probably see Vanderbilt this weekend. Well, you start taking notes on the freshmen, and the sophomores. So you start developing this list of players as as they're a freshman or a sophomore. We have a big thing called the East Coast Showcase, Pro Showcase. It rotates around, but it'll be in Hoover, Alabama, and it's basically the best players from the East Coast, and scouts coach the teams, and they play I think 4 games over this time and take PP and all that. And I mean, it's been amazing, all the players that have gone through that. I mean, from Baumgartner and David Wright and Fielder and Matt Cain, and I mean, just on, and the list is endless of who's played in this thing. So you get a lot of that. You get, obviously with 23 years, I've got a lot of contacts made out throughout the area, and who you can rely on and who, might be a little overzealous on a player like, oh, this guy's great, and whatever. And you sort of know who you can rely on that way. Publications, you just try to get names any way you can. And then you sort of got to, through the process, try to filter them out, because you do have a lot more video now, Twitter, so you, and not that it's this easy, but if you might see a Twitter video of some kid and you might go, you know what, that's a pretty good body and it's a pretty good, loose arm. And yeah, I might want to go back and see that. Or, that looks like a pretty good swing of somebody that maybe you haven't seen or haven't heard about. So you can do some different things like that, but there's so much information out there now. It is a little tough to decipher some of it, but if you don't know of somebody, you can probably find something about them somewhere, and then, and maybe it's, man, that's a horrible arm action, or that's a bad swing, and that probably isn't one that I want to go chase after. You
ever miss on a guy? I'm sure you've missed on a guy, because many guys, but have you ever missed on a guy where you were just like, oh my gosh, and it wasn't even missing, maybe you even scouted him and the Dodgers just couldn't draft him or didn't draft him, or he got taken earlier, or there was a guy that you had like ranked in the 5th or 6th round or even lower, and he goes in the 1st round and he turns out to be this guy, and you're like, man, I'm sure that happens enough times. I won't say
we don't have enough time for me to tell you all the guys I've missed on.
Give me one, Marty, that I would just be like, okay, we all know who that is.
One of the early ones was Corey Hart, that played for Milwaukee, the big hitter, and he was from Bowling Green. Ended up as an all-star, I think, at times. And now this was a long time ago, so the commitments and all that were a little bit different. Going into that spring season, nobody had even signed the kid, wow. Committed to a school, but it was raw. It was big, long, lanky, raw. And, so that one,
sure,
was one of them. But I had to put a couple extra closets in my house for all the skeletons of ones I've screwed up.
Yeah, lock those closets. You know what I'm saying, Marty? Don't let anybody in them. Well, let me ask you this, because obviously you're a member of the Dodgers. They won the World Series last year, so you get a ring. We were talking about that beforehand. You've got a couple other ones, the National League rings as well, when they went to the World Series. But this year they won it for the first time since, I think, 1988. And so you get a World Series ring. I know you haven't gotten it yet, but the guys that are on that team that you scouted, I remember mentioning Buehler and Smith and a few others. I'm wondering, is there any unique gift that a player that you've scouted has ever sent you, or kind of, remembering back to that guy who saw me when I was just getting started? Is there any kind of story there, or somebody that maybe just sends you a Christmas card every year saying, hey, thanks for looking out for me?
I get quite a few Christmas cards. I did have one kid, a high school kid down in Tennessee. After I'd signed him, he had made a leather sort of a wallet money holder, and he gave that to me. That was sort of cool. But I don't know. I still try to stay in touch with quite a few guys that I've signed.
That's good.
And just stay in touch, and you never know. You might run into one that's done playing. He might be coaching somewhere. Corey Wade pitched for the Dodgers in the big leagues. He's now a pro scout. So you run across him at times, but I don't know. I try to stay in touch with them. I've always just tried to stay out of their way, but know that if they needed something, or they needed somebody to talk to, or something was haywire, that they could reach out and I might not know the answer, but I could try to help them.
Sports Spectrum today is presented by Compassion International, the most trusted child development ministry in the world. And right now, children around the world are living in poverty and facing unimaginable circumstances as a result of COVID-19. And communities in poverty are facing shutdowns and restrictions, just like we are, but without any safety net. And as hardworking day laborers, most of the families Compassion serves work each day in order to buy food for that day and maybe the next. And where many of us have stocked up for days or weeks at a time, they have neither the income or even refrigeration to afford to stay at home. And as a result, parents are forced to make unthinkable choices between going to work and risking infection, or not going to work and facing hunger and starvation. And COVID-19 has multiplied their needs exponentially, and they need help. That's where Compassion comes in. That's where you can come in. With Fill the Stadium, a pro-athlete-led initiative raising critical resources for 70,000 children and their families impacted by COVID. Every empty seat represents one child who needs support for the critical next 12 months. This is a stadium that cannot remain empty, and we need your help. You can go to the website, fillthestadium.com. Fillthestadium.com. That's the website. Check it out. You can give, you can donate, and help release these children and their family from poverty. Fillthestadium.com. We're also presented today by Water Mission, and they're a nonprofit Christian engineering ministry fighting the global water crisis with safe water and sanitation and hygiene solutions. And right now they are working to stop the global spread of COVID-19. Urgently needed safe water and sanitation and hygiene solutions. They're providing them, Water Mission is, to refugee settlements and other vulnerable communities. Listen to some of these numbers. These were statistics right before the pandemic. 4.4 billion people lacking access to adequate sanitation. 2.1 billion people lacking access to safe water around the world. These are billion with a B people that don't have adequate sanitation and safe water. Water Mission is stepping in to fill that gap, and you can join them. You can pray with them, and you can donate right now with Water Mission by going to the website watermission.org. Watermission.org, fighting the global water crisis. Watermission.org. Marty Lamb is our guest here on Sports Spectrum. He's an amateur scout with the Los Angeles Dodgers. We are the intersection of sports and faith. So let me ask you a little bit about your faith and intersect the conversation there, which will lead us into your work with Refuge for Women, which is a nonprofit faith-based organization. I want to talk about that in a second. Walk us through a little bit of your faith journey and maybe the importance of the Lord in your life.
Okay. When I was a kid, my grandfather was an elder and mom used to take us to church and all that kind of stuff. So there was always, sort of a baseline, and I think as you read in the Bible and they talk about, at least throwing that seed out early,
Yeah.
And I became a Christian when I was in graduate school at Mississippi State. And so from there, like probably a lot of people, it's been sort of an up and down struggle throughout, and we're all tempted with a lot of different things and just tried to, grow my faith as I got older and mature. And I hope I'm at that, at a better point than I was years ago. It's interesting. We moved churches to Southside or Southland Christian Church here in Nicholasville. Yeah. And John Wiest and Scott Nickel and all the leadership of that church. The main thing that just keeps getting hammered home, I guess, to me, and that I've learned more than anything there is that do as Jesus did. Jesus loved God, Jesus loved people, and Jesus served other people. And I guess I've just tried to simplify it to that. I'm not a very good reader. I've tried to read through the Bible at times, and I get my focus isn't very good, and and I forget what I'm reading, and all these type of things. But I've just tried to, for me personally, and what my brain can handle or what my brain can remember and whatever, it's just to try to keep it as simple as I can, and just try to remember those things. And I think it's helped me, quite a bit. I mean, I'll sit there and try to pray, and I lose focus, and I'm all over the place, and those kind of things. And I've tried to get it now where I write them all out, and so I've had them right there, so it'll keep me on focus. And I don't know if I got ADHD or what, but it's hard for me, and that's just, I guess, what I've found to work best for me. I've got some daily devotional type stuff that I try to go through. FCA, I use the Sports Spectrum one as well. The Southland sends one out and do some of those type of things. But for me, I've just figured out it's easiest to simplify it and try to just remember, how Jesus did, to love God and love others and try to serve others.
Yeah, it's the Great Commission and the Great Commandment is what I tell people. And the Great Commandment is what you just described. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and love your neighbor as yourself. You mentioned John Wiest. I know John a little bit. We haven't connected in probably a year or two, but he was one of those guys who was a big mentor for me when I left ESPN to come to Sports Spectrum. And he was one of those voices that I called and just talked to. And I'm a huge fan of Jesus Prom, I think is what his book was called, and the movement. So John's a great guy and a great leader to be under. That's for sure. Yeah.
He's a good friend of mine. He's got a young boy that was a baseball guy. John's dad used to do the chapel services for the Royals, I believe. Years. So he's a big baseball guy. And the thing is, like, he's just a normal guy, he's this wonderful preacher, but he's like this just normal guy, and he's got the normal problems that you and I and everybody else has, and just trying to get through it and trying to remember those type of things. So.
Yeah, well, that helps, I think, working in a business like professional baseball, that they're just normal guys. It's different kind of problems, but they're just normal people working through the same kind of issues that we all have. I've gotten to know that as well as I've learned to get to know a lot of professional athletes that they just have a little bit more money and a little bit more fame or whatever you want to call it, but they got the same issues that you and I do. And that goes for any kind of person who's in a large influential space, like even a pastor like John Wiest. So your faith's important to you. Serving is important to you, like you said, through Jesus. So this idea of becoming and joining the board of directors for Refuge for Women, which I'll explain what it is. It's a nonprofit, faith-based organization providing specialized long-term care for women who have escaped human trafficking or sexual exploitation. That's a tough one. When you hear that, just even reading that makes me so, as a dad to a daughter, just gets me upset that this exists. And so you joined the board of directors and you're serving with Refuge for Women. Tell us about the decision to join the board and to be involved, and why Refuge for Women?
Right. Now, we could talk about this for a long time, but I'll try to keep it as, so like we were talking about fall of 19, a buddy of mine that I knew he was doing something, but I didn't totally know what it was, and he said, "Hey, would you like to go to lunch with me?" And his name's Ked Frank, and Ked and his wife, Michelle, 11 years ago, had opened up Refuge for Women. And so we go to lunch, and he was, "Hey, what kind of serving, what type of volunteer stuff are you involved with? Are you looking for anything, whatever?" So he started explaining more about Refuge for Women. And I'll be honest with you. I mean, I thought human trafficking at that point was more like that they've got these girls in handcuffs and whatever in the back room, and they won't let them out and that kind of thing. And, through learning more about it, it's more, one of the law enforcement people told us it's more like liquid handcuff, where they get them, might be, different drugs or whatever. And that's the reason they don't want to leave. So anyhow, Ked was asking me, and he said, hey, would you be interested in helping us and getting on the board of directors we're going to open up a new location in Southern California. So basically these locations, let me back up a little bit. So they started in Kentucky, the first one. And basically it's a home. It maxes out at like 6 girls at each home because they don't want it to make it be like a dormitory. They want it to be more like a home. They've got somebody there with them 24 hours a day. It's a secured location. And then all their needs are met, be it medical, food, shelter, obviously, therapy, counseling, Bible studies, all these things, and they have a strict routine, and they go through this program, and there's different levels and different steps, and so they go through the program that way, and then as they get further along in the program, they might start working at a job, and that kind of thing. So you're basically, that's the long-term house, and they started in Kentucky. Well, now we've got a long-term house in Chicago, Las Vegas, North Texas. We just opened up one in South Texas on the Gulf Coast. And the next one to open it up in March is the Southern Cal location. And then that's the one that he said, hey, would you be interested in trying to help us out there? So I'm like, at first you're like, yeah, sure, and I'm like, let me talk to my wife and go, with her and, visit about it and that kind of thing. And so I went and did that. And then I asked a couple of people. One of them was because we partner with Southland. I went to John Wiest and said, hey, what do we got here? Is this legit? I knew Ked, but I was just trying to double check. And so he said, yeah, thumbs up. It's good, whatever. And so I started on the board of directors in Southern Cal. And like we had talked about earlier, we were in pretty good shape. We had just bought a house at the Refuge had just bought a house like January 2020. We had some big fundraisers coming up, and then boom, and then the COVID hit. And so that's been pushed back to probably should open up in March of this year. But the thing is, like with that one is, like we were all gung-ho to get it going and get it started and get it opened and, disappointed that it got pushed back and all this kind of stuff. But if you go back and look, God might not have wanted it open during that time. Maybe we weren't ready, maybe we didn't have enough whatever we needed to get it done. And maybe that, that was our plan, but it might not have been his plan, and I think when we sort of stepped back and looked at it, it was just like, we're going to get this open. We're going to be able to shelter girls out here. But it's, we'll just go by his plan. So, so you've got that long term. And then about June of last year, we opened up on the farm. So the house in Kentucky is on 53 acres. It was an old farmhouse. There was another house there. Somebody, one of Ked's good friends had lived in a house there. They moved, so we bought the whole farm and that other house. So now the other house is what is been turned into an emergency shelter. So let's say, well, what would happen is, let's say law enforcement would get somebody off the street tonight. They could put them up for a couple nights in a hotel, but then that's all they could do for them. Well, now, if let's say somebody tonight needed emergency shelter and we got them, we could take them off the street and put them into this emergency shelter, and they can stay 30 to 60 days at that emergency shelter.
Wow.
And it might, and it's more, we can medically detox them and different things like that when they get there. And then now they're living in the shelter again. We've had a bunch of baptisms through this one and different things like that, which has been awesome. And then the thought is, hopefully after that time, then they will transition on into the long-term house and want to stay for another 12 months at the long-term house. And again, continue to get their feet underneath them. And then three of the locations, Las Vegas, North Texas, and now here in Kentucky, we have also transitional living. So after that year long of long-term living, now we've got either house or apartments where now it's a little less structured. Somebody still, oversees them, but now they're even more in the workplace. They're doing more things on their own and just getting their feet a little bit further into the water that way. The other thing that's been really cool is a thing called Survivor Made, and we started that about a year ago. It's coming up on the anniversary. And the thought was to create this social enterprise so that once either while the girls are in the program or even after the program, we could employ them. They could, have a job, learn job skills, all that kind of stuff. So we started this Survivor Made, and in Kentucky, they started doing candles, and they had all these different candles, different candle packages, so on and so forth. Well, then North Texas, not to be outdone, they've got an old cowboy down there that lives across from them, and I'm not sure who had the idea, either the Refuge or the cowboy, one of the two. Mr. Eli, he sat there and they said, well, let's create some leather goods. So now Mr. Eli comes up with this purse design, and now they're making purses in North Texas. Well, then Kentucky's like, well, we got to get into this purse action also. So now we're creating, the girls are creating and making tote bags, earrings, along with the candles up here in Kentucky. And
wow,
that's been a cool deal because, some of them have never had like a real job and just job skills and earning money. The confidence that you see as they create none of them had ever sewed leather, and, they're on this big industrial sewing machine and learning that, and just accomplishment, self-worth, all those type of things that Survivor Made's creating, along with them making money, them being able to save money, job skills and all that kind of thing. So that's been really a cool deal for us lately. One of the girls even was like, I had messed around with the leather stuff a little bit and tried to put together a wallet. And like the next week, she was like, hey, I want to try one of those wallets, and just, the creativity, her wanting to make, something else and trying to figure it out. And I don't know. So all those kind of things wrapped into this whole program. I don't know. It's really cool. These girls have been, some situations are really, really tough, and they've been in some bad situations. But I'm so proud of them for, one, going through the program, sticking to it, and just the tenacity that some of them are going at it, and just, I don't know, it's pretty cool. It's cool to see, and then them, becoming closer to the Lord, and one of them was talking about, I sent my son, she's got a 5-year-old, sent my son back, a children's Bible, and we're, when I'm able to communicate or talk with them or FaceTime, whatever, we're reading through, that children's Bible and just things like that. So I don't know. I mean, These are some tough girls, man. I mean, they've been through some horrible situations. One of the girls from a few years back had come from us from California. And I mean, Jason, in your ugliest, nastiest imagination could not have come up with what she had gone through. I mean, it was from, mom introduced her to porn at 5 to alcohol, drugs, rehab, overdose, boyfriend dying, mom dying, porn industry, working in the porn industry. I mean, this poor girl. And she ended up coming to Kentucky from California, went through the program, ended up going to Asbury Seminary, finishing her degree. She's married, and she just had twins.
Wow.
And it's like,
how cool is God?
It's just amazing, what God has done for a lot of these girls. One of the girls that had gone through the program, not to go political one way or the other, but Trump had signed like an executive order to help combat human trafficking. Well, one of the girls that had been through the program was in the White House when they signed, that executive order. And I'm like texting Ked and Michelle, and I'm like, can you believe this? Like 10 years ago, you would have thought one of the girls would now be in the White House, with this deal. So I don't know. I mean, it's just the workers, the program managers, the city, all the workers and volunteers and everything. It's just really a cool situation. It's a neat situation. And, these girls, they just need to be loved on, and just show God's love. I thought I'm going on and on, but I could go on forever. But one of the things that I thought was really cool, a buddy of mine here locally, he's got a daughter, and she's about 22 years old. And she's as confident of a young lady as I've ever seen. I mean, she's just got it going on. And so she and I were talking about the Refuge and the program and so on and so forth. And she says, not just these girls, but a lot of girls don't realize or see God's worth in themselves.
Right.
And as soon as she said that, I'm like, you're coming with me. So I said, we got to get you out to the Refuge. So we were trying to look at maybe a part-time shift for her, but she couldn't because of her work. But she goes out there now, and she does like every 2 weeks, she'll go and do a Bible study with them. And those girls absolutely love her. She loves them. I mean, it's just really cool. But it was like, that's what it is. I mean, of her saying that, it was like, you need to be around girls in general, and let them understand that, but especially these girls.
That's amazing. I'm so glad that you spent that few minutes, because I think as people hear those stories, as they hear what Refuge for Women is doing, as I hear how it's expanding, I think it's tugging on some hearts here. And so I'm just going to give the website out. People can go learn more at refugeforwomen.org. Refugeforwomen.org is the place, and you can, see what they're doing. You can contact them. You can get involved. You can donate however you want to be involved. It's such a good cause. Anything that has to do with human trafficking and that world, sexual exploitation, violence, things like that, I'm all in on, like IJM. And, I think about, what the work they do, and they've been partners with us, and certainly Refuge for Women is just doing incredible work. So Marty, this has been great. Thank you for being here. We'll have to have you back on. We'll tell some more baseball stories. We'll tell some more stories about Refuge for Women, but just really appreciate your heart for the Lord, your heart to serve, and the space that God's uniquely placed you in, which is a pretty cool one with the Los Angeles Dodgers. So thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you again pretty soon.
You bet, Jason. Thank you.
Many thanks to Marty Lamb for joining us here on Sports Spectrum today. The Los Angeles Dodgers amateur scout. He does get a ring. We talked a little bit off air. He has 2 rings, National League Championship Series rings when the Dodgers won the National League a few times. and got to the World Series. But last year, 2020, he got a World Series ring. It hasn't arrived yet. He said he's still getting it fitted. Hopefully he'll get his ring pretty soon. He said he has 3 rings and he has 3 kids. And I told him the oldest should get the World Series ring because I was the oldest of 3. And I know that I would want the World Series ring over the National League ring. That's just me. Forgive me for that, of course, but that's okay. Marty's got 3 kids. He's got 3 rings, and it's pretty cool what God is doing in his life. We appreciate him joining us here today on Sports Spectrum. Again, his work with Refuge for Women is so great. I hope you enjoyed all the stories that he shared and the importance of that ministry. Check out refugeforwomen.org to learn more, refugeforwomen.org. And again, thanks to Marty for joining us here on the show. Make sure you check out sportspectrum.com as well for all of our content. That's our home base, sportspectrum.com. Bookmark it, put it in your phone. Go check it out every day, the website, and make sure you're seeing the content that's being shared there. We got a team of people that are doing incredible work. Our social media pages are also kind of refurbished and refinished right now, so you can go check out our social pages, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, our YouTube channel. It's all there with all of the content that you want to follow on the intersection of sports and faith. If you love Jesus and you love sports, this is the place to check out. And then when you're at the website, sportspectrum.com, again, I want to remind you to click that magazine icon, a chance for you to order Sports Spectrum's magazine. If you want to sow into the ministry of Sports Spectrum for literally $18 for an entire year, $20, right? It's a $20 bill. You get the Sports Spectrum magazine, but you also sow into the ministry of Sports Spectrum and allow us to continue to tell these stories of sports and faith like we're doing here on the podcast with Marty Lamb. So check out sportspectrum.com and subscribe to the magazine today. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time right here on the show. Love you guys. My name is Jason. I hope you all have a great rest of your day.